What's going on, guys? Welcome to the Hot List. Thank you guys so much for tuning in as I come to y'all Monday through Friday at 12 o'clock Central Standard Time, where we hang out and we talk real estate. We talk questions about real estate, concerns about real estate, any other real estate topics that you, the listeners, send to me, or I have clients, friends, or family ask me along the way. If you're not sure where to start with your real estate questions, I would be happy to be the real estate resource that you reach out to, you think of first, and shoot me a message to let me know, hey, I have this question. What can I do about it? I greatly appreciate those questions and look forward to you sending those questions as well as answering those, not just for you, but to use those for content as well. Because if you have that question about real estate, there is a high chance somebody else has that same question and just hasn't known where to start or get the ball rolling. So for those of you that are listening to this on Facebook or YouTube, make sure that you hit that thumbs up button, like and subscribe so you get more. And for everybody listening to this on your podcast player of choice, thank you so much for taking the time listening to it. Make sure that you subscribe so new downloads and new episodes are automatically downloaded to your podcast player of choice and you get those as soon as they come out. So, the question of the day: how much paint do I need? Well, I will tell you, before I met my wife and my father in law, paint is paint is paint. Really? Well, let's talk about that. Paint is absolutely one of the greatest materials because it's one of the least expensive materials to deliver one of the biggest visual punches to your home that you're going to see. This fixes a number of problems. You got a tired looking exterior? Paint. Interior closing in on you? Paint. Just updated furniture with every updated your furniture and it clashes with everything else. Yes, this did happen to me. You paint. Paint is a way to brighten your home and sometimes give it that much needed facelift that it needs, not just on the inside, but outside as well. So once you pick a color, what's next? How do you choose the right paint? How much paint do you need for your next project? Choosing a paint is kind of overwhelming. I've been down that road multiple times, and thankfully, I have a wife and a father in law that is familiar with this. So, most of what we're going to talk about is items that I've learned from them and talking to some professional painters as well. With choosing the paint, there's different grades that have different types of characteristics, and each of these can be confusing if you're not familiar with the paint. So, what we're going to talk about today are four things that you need to know when choosing paint. First, we're going to start with composition. I figured this was a good place to start simply because while there are a number of options out there when it comes to paint, for most homeowners, it comes down to two choices: latex or oil. And latex is more of your interior paint, where your oil is going to be exterior, because latex is a lot easier to work with. It's a lot easier to clean up. Um, you will notice with it, it's going to be a little bit softer when it cures. Not going to cure quite as hard as what the oil paint will do, which means it's not the greatest choice for high traffic areas. And then on the other side of that, you've got the oil paint, where it is more difficult to work with. Not just going to wash out with water. You will need some type of spirits or minerals to clean that up. Um, it's which means there can be some fumes, rags that are going to be either reused or thrown away. Now the bright side of it, it will go over damn near anything, which I've learned, and it hardens a lot better. And this is what really makes it the choice, especially for outdoors, because once it hardens, I mean, it can last up to years and years of abuse. Number two on the list is Sheen. No, not Charlie. This is the brightness of the paint, or the sheen of the paint. So your home is yours. The walls are yours, meaning only you, or in my case, my wife, can decide how shiny they want those walls to be. While it might feel like a no-brainer to choose the shiniest paint to get make it feel like the brightest, get a reflection of light off the walls, keep in mind that the brighter the paint, it's going to show the most amount of imperfections. So whether it's you, your pets, your kids, um, all of these imperfections are going to be shown through that brighter and higher sheen paint. And let's be honest, how many houses out there are actually perfect? I'd be willing to bet not many. I know mine is far from that. If you have some walls or other surfaces that are going to be less than perfect, and you're going to want to paint those, or once you do paint those flaws are going to stand out pretty bad with a shinier finish. Personally, we use the eggshell. Um, we've noticed that after 3 kids and God knows how many pets, that was the best paint to hide the imperfections on the wall. Obviously, the imperfections were from the kids, and not from us at all. Isn't that right, babe? If you're listening to this, and then another area of the sheen that you really want to take into consideration is cleanliness. Generally, the shinier the paint finish is going to be, the easier it is to clean or just wipe off. The eggshell that I mentioned that we use in our house doesn't just wipe off like if you did some type of higher gloss paint. You will need to put a little bit elbow grease into it, but typically it will still come off with water. Uh, you just don't want to put too much elbow grease in it and pull off the paint. Number three on the list is durability. Like I mentioned, before I met my wife and my father-in-law, I thought paint was paint. Oh, how wrong I was. There are paints for $20 a gallon, $40 a gallon, and clear up to 80 plus dollars a gallon for paint. $80 a gallon for paint? Um, that just blew me away. And with the pricing, um, the types of paints are going to be priced the way they are because of those different characteristics that they have. Durability is typically one of the biggest factors when it comes to the price of paint, because cheap paint is just that. It's cheap. It's generally not meant to last long. It's kind of a temporary fix, or a band-aid, if you will, which means that you're going to have to redo it more often, or even touch it up more often. Where you're going to have some more on the other end of the spectrum that are going to be the top of the line paints. These are likely going to be mixed with some type of UV resistant materials, weather resistant chemicals, and maybe some other fancy stuff to keep the paint looking better for longer. So all of that is really going to go into pricing and durability. And I've talked about all that to lead up to number four on the list, which is the paint math. And when it comes to that, you know, paint isn't paint. It's not just a one and done like I have thought for years and have done for years. I mean, who knew most paints paint gallons tell how many coats it's going to take to cover a wall, or how much they'll cover? Um, I had no idea. Of course, this is assuming that you've primed the walls, which if you don't prime your walls or haven't primed your walls, absolutely do that. As somebody who moved into a house that didn't have any walls that were primed and they were just painted, we could, if we had a little paint chip or something and you got to peeling on that, your entire, turns out your entire paint on that wall, which in my case was about a 12-foot section, just came off by me peeling that, and my wife was pissed. So don't don't do that. One of the other bigger factors when figuring out how much paint is needed um, is going to be your price of the paint. So a one coat coverage from a $50 gallon. This is going to be like your kills is typically cheaper than two or three coats of your $20 paint. So think Walmart. So keep in mind with that, if you can do one and done, it is possible. You just have to buy the right paint for it and not a cheaper line of paint. So how to calculate the amount of paint that is needed? Um, just keep in mind as we're talking through this, you're going to have some waste. These calculations that you're going to do are going to be more like estimates because with this, it's not going to be an exact science. It's going to be more like an art form. And you see somebody like my wife or my father-in-law paint. I mean, it's beautiful. They get the rollers right. They get the brushes right, and then you see me painting, and it looks like I'm having a seizure. So it's one of those things that it is absolutely an art form and can be beautiful done properly. And because of the way I paint, that's also one of the reasons I'm not allowed to paint. And my wife just kind of takes the tools from me and just tells me to back away slow. So to calculate your paint needs, what you're going to do is you are going to multiply your surface height by the length. I would recommend using feet if that is what you're most comfortable with, or whatever. If you're comfortable with meters, obviously that's going to be the best route to go. So, for example, uh, if you have a 10-foot high wall and it's 20 feet long, 10 times 20, that's 200 square feet of paint surface that you're going to have. So once you determine the paint that you want, look how many look on the gallon to see how many feet that bucket is going to cover and how many coats. Generally, 1 gallon of paint covers approximately 250 square feet, which we're going to call the first coat. And more often than not, you will need at least two coats, if not more. This means you're going to need at least twice as much paint. And I would also recommend rounding up instead of down because you're more likely to find some thin spots or spots that need to be touched up. Um, and one last thing that I would add with rounding up as well, your paint is going to have a custom tint to it. No matter what paint you choose, they're going to go over to the computer in the machine, mix it. It's going to have some type of tint to it. So if you have more, it's going to be better to not have to make a second trip or a third trip back to the paint store because you're going to get it all right the first time. And with paint, even though it is computerized now and set up in most locations, if you go back a second or a third time, that paint is going to be off just enough that it's not going to match exactly with your other walls. So it is always better do the math, round up. That way you have a little bit of extra if you need touch up in the future, or, God forbid, something happens with your kids or you end up with a hole in the wall, needs to be patched, you'll have some extra that do it. So those are the 4 areas and 4 things you need to know when choosing paint. Again, number 1 was composition. 2 most popular with the average homeowner is latex paint or oil paint, and latex is obviously the better one, an easier one to work with than the oil paint. Number 2 is the sheen, which is the brightness of the paint. And just remember, the brighter or the shinier the paint ends up being, the more imperfections it's going to show. And just know that going into it. But the shinier it is, the easier it will be to wipe off or clean up. Number 3 on the list was durability. This is one of the biggest factors when it comes to the pricing of the paint. Your $20 a gallon paint is not going to last as long or hold up like a $50 or $60 a gallon paint will do, and it's going to look better and last longer overall just because of the types of materials that's mixed in it. And finally, when it comes to the paint math, it's not an exact science. These are going to be estimates. You are going to have some waste, but all you got to do is just multiply the height of the wall by the length of the wall. Do that for each one, and know that at least 2 coats are recommended. You may get away with 1 coat if you choose a higher end paint. More often than not, you're going to just need to do 2 coats with the paint that you have, and you'll need at least twice as much per wall in the area that you're doing. So I hope that helps. I hope that gives you guys some insight and some knowledge behind painting, what's involved with it, and helps you with the math for your upcoming projects as well. If you have questions that I didn't answer or concerns I didn't answer in this, please feel free to reach out to me. You can just drop your questions in the comments. They will get to me, whether you're listening to this on Facebook or YouTube. If you're listening to this on your podcast player of choice, leave it in the comments. I will get a notification and answer that as soon as I can. Thank you guys so much for tuning in again. I greatly appreciate it. I'm your host, Matt Johnson with Keller Williams Realty. I do this because your experience matters and should be trusted with a veteran. Y'all have a phenomenal weekend, and I'll see you back here on Monday. Take care.